Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Let's welcome our main speaker, Terri.
Hi, I'm Terri. I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Susie for asking me to come share. And I'm sure she was really surprised when she walked up to me and said, "So who's the first speaker?" And I said, "Why are you asking me?" She said, "Well, you said you wanted to bring one." I said, "Really?" So thanks, Meredith, for hopping in. It's just great. My early Alzheimer's works really well for the girls I sponsor, because they know if they get an assignment and they don't bring it up, I won't remember. And then it'll be like it happened, you know? I give people my number, and sometimes they say, "I'm sorry I didn't call," and I have to resist going, "And you are." It's hard, you know, people walk up to you in a meeting and you see them a lot of times and then they go, "Do you know who I am?" And, you know, you just hate to say anything. You know, I just like, what do you say, right? Rigorous honesty's Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that in some ways my memory's a lot worse than it used to be, because I used to remember every single slight that ever happened to me. And, you know, I think I remember when it came time to do my inventory, they said, just start with your first resentment and go from there. And I think mine, I was like 2 years old, and or 3, and I had crawled up onto my mom's bed, and I was pretending like I was a fly going around her lips like this, trying to wake her up, and she bit me. And the resentment wasn't that she bit me. The resentment was she said she thought it was a fly. And even at that age, I knew she would not bite a bug, right? So that was like the first thing on my list. So you can imagine. That's 27 years of resentments already. Today, if I get mad at you and I don't see you for a week, I'll forget. I'm really glad to be here. Really, I'm glad to be anywhere clean and sober. You know, I'm a low-bottom, textbook alcoholic. I was somewhere the other day, and we were talking about morphine or something, because, you know, I don't know why. We talk about that kind of stuff when we're hanging out with nothing to do. And, you know, just started talking about fond memories of morphine, and I was like, yeah, I remember being like, you know, 14, and, you know, I'd been stabbed, and so I was in the hospital, and I was smoking a cigarette in bed, high on morphine, watching Get Christy Love. And I was thinking, you know, that's really one of my better memories of adolescence. So if you're an alcoholic like me, you'll get that, you know. It's like, those are my ideas of really good times. Or another time is I went to Vegas with my sugar daddy at the time and his friend, and took my friend Grace, and, you know, we went over there and gambled and got hassled by the police because they thought we were hookers. And fortunately on that trip we brought our guys with us, so we were cool. And then the guys had to go because my sugar daddy was having a baby, so not himself, but, you know, he had to fly home because his wife was having a baby. And so he left us there in the room, and so we were drinking all these kamikazes, and, you know, of course, the guys were giving us money to gamble, and so we were gambling, and I'd never had a kamikaze, and we were partying, and then we got on the plane to come home, and then there was this really cute guy, like, just up this way to the left, long, lanky legs, and I don't know, we kind of, hey, like this, and it turned out he lived in Escondido, and he was a veterinarian, really cute. And he said, you know, I live in Escondido, I'm not doing anything, what are you guys doing? So, short order, we got off the plane, decided to go to Mexico, and hopped in the van I got in the van with the veterinarian, and Grace was in my car, or the car, I don't know whose car, following us to Mexico. And it was like the best weekend I ever had, and, you know, I never saw this guy again. I never saw these people again. I mean, this was just sort of, to me, that was a good time, you know, just, if I never saw you again, that even made it better, you know? If you're the kind of alcoholic like me, you'll get married a second time because you couldn't remember why you didn't like it the first time. Literally, people say, well, why did you marry Dave? And I said, because I couldn't remember why I didn't like being married to Bobby. I mean, I just couldn't remember. It had only been 3 years. I was unhappy about it as soon as it was done. I was like, oh, man, I can't believe I did this again. You know, it's sort of like you feel if you've ever been sober and drank, and the minute you drink, like before you drink, because I went out a lot, before you drink, you know, head's got all these really good reasons why it's probably a good idea, you know, and how it's going to help, and you're not going to feel bad, and you sort of test the thought over and over in your mind. You're like, okay, in my mind, I've drank, and now here I am, and I'm okay, and nothing's, you know, you just test it and test it. But when you actually drink, then there's this impending doom immediately, you know, absolutely, like in that moment, and that's how I felt as soon as I got married the second time. You know, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 27, and I had like a distended liver, I had a heart murmur, I drank beer like most people drank water and soda pop. I never drank those things. When I got up, whenever I would say in the morning, but I usually didn't get up in the morning, I just reached for a beer. And if my stomach was bad, I drank a lot of milk. So milk and beer. And then to get high, I drank, you know, of course, whiskey. So when I got sober the first time, I remember going down and 12-stepping this guy who was a real alcoholic down in Playa, this other salesman I knew. And I remember taking him to this Thai food place across the street, and I ordered a pitcher of beers to have a talk with him. And he said, well, you know, apparently he had been here before because he said, aren't you not supposed to drink anything? I go, I'm not one of those kind of alcoholics. I just can't drink whiskey or do cocaine. But I can smoke pot and drink beer. You know, I can do the maintenance, you know. This is not really drinking. So, I mean, I thought of beer like water, you know, just really, you can't drink beer. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of newcomers here, but I wonder if you guys are as baffled as I was going into a store to drink something. You know, you go in the liquor store and you're standing there like, okay, so what do you buy? If you know, what do people drink? And, fortunately, they had like little canned carbonated waters, and so at some point, I got into those, and I'd chug them and crunch them, and chug them and crunch them. You know, that's how I did my fifth step. I'm reading and chugging and crunching and chugging and crunching. My sponsor was like on the edge of her seat, you know, is she gonna drink after this? So it was, you know, a lot of times I hear people say they're so happy to be sober. They know now everything. You know, like the book says, self-knowledge avails us nothing. But, you know, people get sober and they have a little self-knowledge and they go, I got it. I know. I don't know why I ever drank. You know, I've just got all the answers to my psyche and my innermost self. And I'm studying with a guru. And I've met Mr. and Mrs. Right. And now I got all the money in the world. And I have no idea why I drank. I'm not that kind of alcoholic. I'm the kind of alcoholic that has all of that and goes, oh my God, I need a drink. You know, my idea of keeping it simple is getting up, whenever that is, getting the money that I need to get what I need to get comfortable, to get off and go to sleep. And that's it. That's simple. So when I came here and you guys said, well, keep it simple, I thought, what? I mean, just being out in the daylight is a very complicated thing for most alcoholics. At least for me, I couldn't believe everybody was moving around so much. And they were alert and doing things and asking questions and hard questions too, like, how you doing? Oh my God, and talking about feelings, I didn't know what a feeling was. If it wasn't anger, hostility, or self-pity, I didn't know what it was. You know, pain and rage, those are my two ranges, and that few minutes right after really good sex that I was always shooting for when I was getting high. You know, just for 5 minutes. And obviously none of you have had those 5 minutes. The good news is in sobriety I have a lot more routes to that feeling, so keep coming back. It's a good life. It's a good life for an addict alcoholic like me. You know, I'm a person that drank, used, and broke out in handcuffs a lot. I was always completely misunderstood. And in fact, one time I was actually arrested by SWAT and asked them if I could call my mom. Now, my mother wouldn't even let me come to her house. She was terrified of me, you know, like I was very moody. And so I don't know what I was thinking, but in fact, she did ultimately made bail on that one, and she was so terrified of me, she just went up there. I had to really talk her into coming to get me by telling her that the jail was full of lesbians. They were going to rape me if she didn't come get me. And she came up, left the money, and left. Just left me up at Civil Brand on top of the hill in the middle of the night. You know, it's like, wow, thanks, Mom. But you know, that's just the way I was. You know, people were really scared of me. You know, they were just feeling like I was pretty wild and crazy. And the only people that weren't were the real nuts. You know what I mean? Like, which were all my boyfriends and things, you know. The crazier, the better, in my book. That's how it worked. And I don't know if that's, you know, I assume today that that's because I was so full of, I was so uncomfortable on the inside, I needed a lot going on the outside. You know, all that drama wasn't anything to me. You know, people hear my story, and sometimes I don't tell it all because then they think they're not an alcoholic. Because they're like, well, gosh, I didn't go to jail, and I didn't get beaten, and I didn't get stabbed, and I didn't roll my car and break my neck and get discovered by a deer. I guess I don't belong here. And my message is, all that happened to me, and I still didn't think I belonged here. So, you know, what does it take? I have no idea. I really don't. So I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 27, and I had a daughter who was 9, and I really hadn't drawn sober breath. I mean, if I could help it, in a long time. I can't even remember. Probably, I don't even remember. So, a long time, and which was fine with me. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was looking for friends, trying to influence people, or even trying to stay out of jail. I came, there wasn't, you know, it's kind of funny because, and I don't know if this is your story too, but I was not at the lowest point in my life when I got sober. I wasn't, you know, my life was probably more manageable when I got sober than it had ever been, which is kind of weird. But so I realized not too long ago that because I didn't consider my life unmanageable when I was going to jail, or when I was on the streets, or when the relationship wasn't working out, or when I got my ass kicked one more time because I just do not know how to shut up when I'm drunk. You know, I'm very, you know, like I'm like a little quiet person when I'm not high, and then when I get drunk, I'm just over the top. And then if you scare me, it's even worse because then I'm, you know, I'm very determined not to let you know you scare me, and then I really end up just getting hurt. So what I liked in the book is it said most of us show very little scars from all that we've taken because, I mean, I've been beaten beyond recognition. I don't think it's a mistake that it's always been my mouth, you know, that's gotten like, you know, what happened to you? You know, nobody ever twisted my arm or anything. It's always the mouth, you know, it's like. So I just kind of came here, and I really just didn't have any social skills, and somebody just told me, one of the girls I was talking to recently, I learned so much about myself from working with others. I just do, and I was 12-stepping people from the minute I hit here. I mean, I have 12-step people that are sober a lot longer than me because I couldn't keep it, but I really wanted to give it away, and I'm sort of like one of those bad kids that if you put in charge of the class, they'll do really well. So when you guys said, we're glad you're here, you know, you can help others, boy, I was on hit. You know, I was like, okay, show me you're homeless, you're needy, you're police harassed. And I would just pick people up, and then I would take them to your house because I didn't know what to do with them. And I'd come and knock on your door like a puppy who just found a bird and said, here, look what I found, you know. Come on, let's do our thing, you know. I had no message, you know, just I was sure everybody was an alcoholic. By the time I surrendered, I just figured we were all like that, you know. It was kind of interesting. But I realized about a year ago talking to this girl that I really did not, you know, my life was not at its lowest point. And I think what it was is that my life became emotionally unmanageable. And otherwise, when people said that alcohol didn't work for them, I didn't get it. Because I've never taken a drug that didn't work. And, you know, I've understand drinking and not being able to really get drunk. But if you're determined enough and you got everything you need, you will get high. You know, I mean, that's just the way chemicals work on the human body. So I didn't really get that. I got that, you know, I could drink all day and nothing would happen. And then other times I could drink just a little bit and just black out. So it was real toxic for me. But anyway, the point is that, but somewhere along the line in this quietness of my own spirit, when my life really looked almost normal, you know, I'd been coming in and out of AA, trying to get sober, had a little apartment. Well, actually, it was my friend's apartment. She let me sleep in the living room. And it was the same thing, though, you know. And then my daughter was living with me, and I had a little job I was trying to do. But, you know, the thing is that my life was just emotionally unmanageable. I could not get it to be okay. And then I came to alcohol, you know, and one day I realized that I was constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. Well, that was a major turning point in my life. And to this day, when I'm really stuck and don't know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling and why things are not working, it always comes back to that. It's like, what lie are you telling yourself today, Terry? You know, to make you feel like you got something going on, you know, because that's what we do. You know, I don't know why, as alcoholics, we're so invested, like we could get our arm ripped off and we act like this is normal. Like, that's okay, I'll deal with it later. You know, I mean, we are so invested in making the extraordinary seem like it's nothing. It's unbelievable, you know, because I think, at least for me and what I've seen, is we don't want to have the human thing. You know, we don't want to look too human over here. Don't start crying if you're upset. You know, just, you know, keep it in, keep it tight, you know, like this, right? So coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and staying sober for a while, you know, you start to really thaw out in here because this shit will kick your butt. And I don't mean Alcoholics Anonymous, but I mean life. You know, life in reality for an alcoholic who's usually very committed to fantasy is a heartbreaking experience. And that's why it was nice for me to come to meetings, because you guys lifted me up. You hung little chips on my coffee cup and said, keep coming back, Terry. We need you. You know, you're important here. And truly, I'd never had anyone who just wanted me to come around for no apparent reason. Not to say that some of you didn't have your reasons, but you know. And that touched me. It just really did. It did kept me coming back. And you said, if you keep coming back, you'll hear what you need to hear to do what you need to do to get free. And that really resonated with me, because when I got sober, I didn't know why I drank. You know, if people say, well, why'd you drink? I'd say, I don't know. But I knew when I heard that word freedom that that's what I wanted, and that's why I drank. And the longer I'm sober, the more I realize that the only prison I've ever known is in my head, between my ears, really. You know, it's like, it's almost, I realized the other day that it's like maybe in the beginning of my life, as a child, they did it to me. And then I started drinking and I did it to me. Then I had a child and I did it to her. And then she did it to me. And now she's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just interesting how this disease just manifests. And so I say this too, that we have so many personalities that, like, you know, if you don't like the one you're experiencing at the moment, just be patient. Another will pop up any minute. Just, that's why going to meetings is good. If you're not feeling good, if you're feeling out of sorts, just go to a meeting. If nothing else, you'll be so busy judging everybody else in the meeting, you'll feel a lot better when you come out. Say, man, I'm not as bad as those guys. When I went to my first AA meeting, a long time before I actually got sober, and it consisted of like 8 women. And I mean, my memory is just very twisted because, you know, I was new and I don't even know why I was in this meeting. But I remember that they looked all scarred up to me. You know, one chick blew her hand off, and some other chick was all burned on her face, and I was like, oh my God. And one chick was saying that her mom had cancer and she stole her chemo and morphine. I'm like, dang, these chicks are sick, you know? And then they started calling me after I went. You know, I thought they were stalkers, you know, because I was all paranoid from the coke. You know, it's like crazy. And I was so wound, you know. I mean, I was the one, if you see people, if you see a woman come in a room, like tomorrow, a newcomer, and she's sweating and she's taking her shirt off and on, and she's sitting and then she's up, and then she's in the bathroom, and then she's fidgeting, and then she's doing her nails over in the corner, and then she's fussing around in a bag, and you want to just reach over and knock her out, you know? That was me. My hair was permed so tight, my eyes were big, and I mean, I just felt like something was screaming in my head. And my biggest fear was that I was going to hurt one of you guys, because you are so annoying to the newcomer. I mean, so annoying. There's nothing in life more annoying to the newcomer than a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, let me tell you. I mean, we're polite, we look at you, we listen, and in our head we're going, who the hell is this, you know? When you guys said, keep coming back, I thought you wanted something I had. I swear. I was like, why do they keep saying that? And then you're like, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. And I go, dang, if you'd stop talking about it, I'd stop thinking about it. They're so obsessed over there with the drinking thing, you know, God. What is it? Enough already. And if you're a person who's lost your time in here and you're coming back, you know, our least favorite question in the whole wide world is, how much time you got, right? I mean, don't you hate it? You go walking up to somebody to try to help them and impart your pearls of wisdom on them, and then they want to know how much time you got, and it's only a couple days. I find that really annoying. Just because you don't know how to use it don't mean you don't know it. You know, that's something I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why sometimes, you know, if you're too entrenched in a group, sometimes it's good to just get out and utilize the autonomy of Alcoholics Anonymous, because sometimes it's easier to hear the message when your mind doesn't have so much to play with about what you know about this person and how long they've been, you know, because really, we're not here because we're well-rounded and, you know, just rising a little above the ground and us and God are walking, you know, hand in hand over here, you know. We're just a bunch of drunks. Nobody trained us. I mean, there may be some exceptions in here. I understand it's a profession now. Professional alcoholics. Have you heard about them? Well, anyway, I'm not one of those. But, you know, for the most part, most of us are just drunks. And it's interesting when you sponsor someone and they call you because they've read something in the book that they've decided you haven't done. And they're like, when I told you my fifth step, you didn't say that. I said, girl, I'm not a professional. I'm just a drunk. I'm just an alcoholic trying to do what I can over here. You can find someone better. Go ahead. You know? It's really not that serious. I mean, if you ask me, I'll try and help, you know. And the thing that really saved me here is because I didn't have a lot of trust. You know, I didn't have any trust. The truth is, I had never not been betrayed by someone I trusted, starting with my folks and, you know, all kinds of guys, molestation, everything. So I didn't have any trust. You know, I didn't want you touching me, and I didn't believe you, and I didn't trust you. And I certainly didn't want to know what you thought about anything, because I already had enough trouble with what I thought. And now I got what you think, so it's like, ugh. So the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous deals in experience, strength, and hope was a life-saving formula for me. It just really was. For you to say to me, this is what I did, and this is what happened, take what you want, leave the rest, that saved my life. For you to say, well, I don't have any kids, Terri, why don't you go over and talk to so-and-so over there, she's got I had a sponsor who said, I don't know how you stay sober with that kid. You should go over and talk to so-and-so, she has a kid. And so then that's what I go and do, you know? And because when you go to therapy, therapists say, well, I don't know, what do you think? And I go, I know what I think, that's why I'm here. You're not helping me. You know, I want some clear direction. You know, I went to CODA for a while, another meeting, you know, codependence and all this. I went to CODA for a while, but they don't want to give you any direction over there. You know, nobody wants to be codependent, they don't want to sponsor, you know? They don't even want to show facial expressions that they identify. They just go like this. You know? It's a good program, but I need feedback. I remember calling my sponsor a few years ago, and I'm like, okay, I know. She's like, 1, 2, and 3. God could and would if he were sought. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but I need a timeline, you know? Like, I'm in this truck on this highway with everything I know in the back of the truck, 2 sponsees in the front, 2 people following us, up on the coast of Oregon, no place to put my stuff. God couldn't win if he were sought. I'm just wondering when, okay? Because I got to turn the truck in, and I have to let these people go home at some point. We all can't wait for God to make us move, you know. But, you know, I couldn't stay sober when I came here, primarily because I didn't go through the treatment program. I really had never drawn sober breath. I did not really know anything about just being alive, like going to the grocery store and all that was really very overwhelming. And it's funny because you guys say you never have to go through anything alone again if you don't want to. You just ask someone to help you, and they will. And if they don't, ask someone else. You know, we work with the collective pool. And the good thing about AA is you'll never have somebody, generally speaking, I've heard exceptions, that will say, well, your hour's up, I got to go. You know, if you're freaking out and you need some help and you're trying to do something, we'll generally sit down with you, and we'll be there for you until you don't need us to anymore. You know, I've had girls, you know, come to my house. I've had them so freaked out over inventories, they were on my couch for a week writing their inventory. You know, it's like, whatever you need. You know, I'm going to be there for you. That's just the way it is, because that's what you did for me. And in here, we don't really have the law of reciprocation like out in the world. In other words, I give to you, but you don't give to me, you give to her. And then she gives to her. So it's really cool because it kind of leaves ego at the door a little bit. You know, you don't have to sit up here and count how many times I called you back. You know, if you gave to me and now you're waiting, you know, do I owe you a thank you note? You know, how many things can I give you? Because it's not like that. You know, I help you and then you help somebody else. So there's no obligation here. You know, it's so neat. It's especially neat for the 12-stepper because we're doing it because somebody already did it for us. So nobody owes us nothing. We're paying back. And that's a nice place to be. It just really is for me. It's really saved my life. And so let's see, what can I tell you? Let's see. Why don't we talk about the alcoholic mind? Because, you know, that's just my favorite topic. Because I like the way our head thinks, you know. I mean, isn't it kind of fascinating? Meredith touched on it. She said it's like watching the circus go by. You know, let me just tell you, if nobody's told you, your head is not your friend, okay? I mean, when I was new, I was very in touch with that. I knew that if anybody said to me what my head said to me, I would kick their ass left and right? But I couldn't get at it, so instead of fighting it, it would say jump, and I'd go, how high? How long? When can I stop, right? That's dry. You know, if you're wondering the difference between dry and sober, it's the pause between what your head thinks and your reaction to it. When we go to meetings and we're writing and we're in touch with our sponsor and, you know, we're working with others and we've got the conscious contact going, when head says jump, we say, oh, really? Why? You know, how does that fit in? You know, how does that work in with the scheme of things? Let me run that past somebody else. You know, I mean, it's just not that, like, if I don't jump right now, my life is over. You know, and when you're dry and head says jump, you have to react. You have to respond. That obsessive compulsive thing is on live. And if you've had that spin in the brain, you know that once you're in it, it's really hard to get out. So, you know, if you, by the grace of God, are just sitting here and you're not in the spin in your head right now, like in other words, if you just heard what I just said, that is some amazing shit. I used to share a lot when I was new because my story has a lot of blood and guts and rock and roll and sex and all this craziness, right? So they were asking me to speak all the time, and, you know, I thought I was saving the world, and I was so happy, you know, me and God and, you know, you guys. And one day I saw some girl at a meeting I didn't know, and she said, oh, I just love you. Are you getting ready to speak? And I said, yeah. And she said, tell them that Al Green in the shower story. I love that story. And I said, I don't have an Al Green in the shower story. So now I know, don't worry, because most people won't remember anything anyway. You know, my main message up here is it's doable. You know, I have grave emotional and mental disorders. I got a lot of history of violence and abuse and very hard things. I was a low-bottom, dysfunctional alcoholic. Just going to the grocery store was something that would have made me want to shoot heroin. You know, it's like, why do they need like 10 cans of green peas? And what do you do with $10 in the grocery? I mean, the aisles are high, and, you know, you just have an anxiety attack in the grocery store. And, you know, I wasn't employable. I mean, I tried to get a job at a bank. because some guy thought it'd be a good idea. And, I always took direction in here. I've taken the most weirdest direction. And I think the bank application was probably the weirdest because 10 years later, I became the guardian of my grandparents. And part of that was getting your fingerprints done and them running your information. And it turns out I have this kidnapping for ransom on my record. And I thought, no wonder the airlines wouldn't hire me. Like, can you imagine the bank looking at my application and then pulling my thing and going, oh my God. All I can say is I'm glad I was 10 years sober before I found that out. That's all I can say. I mean, I walked around oblivious for a long time thinking I had no character defects and no one knew, what a freak I was, and little did I know, they all knew. They were like, oh my gosh. I remember going to a diversion class and I was sober, not long, but, for me a long time. 10 minutes was a long time. And I remember the guy points to me and goes, how much is an ounce of cocaine? And I go, why are you looking at me? I'm probably the only sober person in this classroom, So, life was good when I was early sober. I mean, it was really traumatic, but you know what you guys offered? You offered fellowship. You said, Terry, do you need to eat? And we'd go eat. We'd have soup. I wish you hadn't told me so much about the food and sugar. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to talk much more about that, but I really learned to eat well. And the sugar thing. But anyway, and you went to my first parent-teacher meeting with me, when the teacher person already knew I was an alcoholic. I was so traumatized about that. And I took this guy, Chris, with me. And it was years later. I thought Chris was kind of retarded, but because he looked a little bit like he was retarded. And so I asked him to go, just thinking he could give me some moral support and wouldn't be too much trouble. And I remember the teacher was like, is this your husband? I said, no. And he said, well, who is he? I said, his name's Chris. I mean, it's funny in here, you can just know people intimately for years and all you know is like their first name, Oh, Chris. I think he's an engineer or something, Another time when I was new, I had to go to my mother's, for Christmas dinner. I didn't have to go, but they had heard I was sober, and they were curious because, they were scared to let me go to their house most of the time. They were curious, and they wanted to get a look at me. So they invited me out to dinner, and I didn't want to go. I was scared. I was at the Alano Club at a marathon. By the way, marathons are great. If you haven't been to one, that's the move. Anytime there's a holiday or anything, in AA, we have marathons, and getting involved with them helps you know people. You can bring food and stuff. I mean, the best way, when I was new, I would see people up here talking and meetings and whatever and say, gosh, I want to be like that. I want people to know who I am, be glad to see me and stuff. Well, the way that happens is to just give, just show up and see if you could bring something, or see if somebody needs some help. People don't bother you too much, but they kind of get to know you in kind of a way that's not so freaked out. But anyway, so I'm up at the marathon at the Alano Club, and I decided I don't want to go. It's too stressful. I mean, I knew they were all just sitting around my mom's living room waiting for me to come in, and here comes here comes Terry. So I was too scared, and I called and said, I don't think it's really going to work for me, blah, blah. My mom goes, oh, we're all waiting. My mom's like kind of, wealthy and conservative and everything, so I'm like, okay. So I turned around, and there was this guy I never saw before, and his name was, I forget his name, but it's not important, but he had a little suit on. Really cute, little tie, little suit. And I turned around and I said, wow, you look great. And he goes, thanks. And I said, want to go to my mom's for Christmas dinner? And away we went, And he was great, It took them like 3 years to ask me who this guy was. It was funny. Like, who was that guy 3 years ago? And sometime later, he came back to the Alano Club. He wasn't regularly there. And I was up there because I was always there. And he comes running up the stairs and he goes, Terry, I'm so glad you're here. My mom's in the car. Really cute. Miss that guy. one time I went to a funeral in Wisconsin, and I went out there with my sister, who's perfect. She's perfect. She is perfect. Even my sponsor said she's perfect. So she's officially perfect. So I went with my perfect sister, and she's a gossip. Now, I'm a very self-absorbed person, so I'm not into gossip. In fact, I have one of those attention spans that as soon as I find out it has nothing to do with me, that's it. I swear to God, it is tough. I have to really pray. I have to pray to pay attention and remember that everything has something to do with me, so focus. That even if it's your problem, it's probably something I need to work on, so pay attention. Anyway, so I'm with my sister, and we're 500 miles with this woman, my sister, and by the time we get there, I know all about every single cousin and how one lost the tip of his finger and all this craziness. And we walk in, the funeral's happening, everybody's drunk, and they start hugging me and smelling on me, and I can't stand it with the beer and all, right? So I go, I'll be right back. So I ran next door to the grocery store, and I said, you guys got a phone? And they said, sure, you can use the one behind the cash register. I'm loving this town already, okay? Anyway, I went back there and used their phone book, called AA, and they said, okay, well, we got a clubhouse here. We'll send someone over. He'll be there in a few minutes to get you. And I said, okay. So the one thing about taking action is, and you got to be aware of this, that just thinking about taking action often makes you feel so good, you think you don't need to do the action. So don't let that fool you, okay? Because the feeling won't last unless you actually do it, you know? It'll be there just for a minute, and then it's like a cheap hit, you know? You really got to take the action for the feeling to stick. Really, have you noticed that? Like, if you just sit in a room and it's participation, you go, I think I'll share. All of a sudden, your mood lightens, and you go, no, I don't think so, and you go, ugh. You know, so beware of that. I don't know why that happens. But anyway, so I said, well, I got the key to the rent-a-car. I better go give it to my sister. And right about that time, she comes walking out of the funeral thing, and a big, huge, hairy guy on a motorcycle comes pulling into the parking lot, and he goes, you, Terri? I go, yeah. I was so glad to see him, you know. And my sister goes, where are you going? And I go, with him. She goes, you're kidding. I go, no, I'm not. I'll be back, you know. I mean, you guys told me, and you have to stay sober no matter what. You know, you told me I could leave anytime I'm uncomfortable. You told me you'll be here anytime I need to call. Just pick up the phone and take the action. If I can't get anyone on the first call, keep calling. Because God happens. It's not just me and you, you know. Once I start to reach out, the universe just takes hold and starts pushing us toward what we need to be and the good. And that's just really, I mean, I remember there's a time, and if you haven't hit it, there's a time in sobriety where you hit like an emotional recovery, where you're sober a while, and then you just, could be a week, could be months, could be a couple years, and all of a sudden, you know, I was just overwhelmed with a feeling that I felt like I'd had all my life. And I can remember saying, God, I can't stay sober with this feeling, I just can't. You know, and I was freaking out, and I was over at an AA party, praying in the bathroom on the floor. I mean, you know, it was all dramatic. And then I got home, and I was still freaking out, and so I started calling everyone I knew, but it was a Friday night. Everybody was out, right? And then I hadn't even ever hung up the phone, and one time I picked it up, and my sponsor was on the phone. You know, that's what I mean, you know, weird stuff like that. I was graduating from college here in the program, and I had my eyes closed, and I was sitting in the sun, and I was listening because the guy started talking about Adam and Eve, and I said, oh, we're going to be here forever. And all of a sudden, somebody tapped me on the leg and scared us all. I guess a few of us had our eyes closed. And it was a guy from the Alana Club, and he was a saxophone player in the band, you know. Just stuff like that, you know, angels coming out of somewhere to just say, hey, we're here, you know, it's all good. And, you know, that camaraderie and stuff means everything to me. You know, it's really something to know that we're not in this alone, that it is doable, you know, and everywhere we look, there's somebody out there trying to do it, trying to be a little more than they are, you know, just trying to reach just a little above what they've known all their life, which is nothing. You know, we come in here with really no hope. I don't know about you guys, but I had no hope when I came here. I never had any hope in my life. Hope for what? It's hard to have hope when you come up like some of us who come up. You know, it just is. What do you believe in? Where is God when all that shit's happening? So it's a lot to overcome when we come here. But you know what? It's doable. And you were my key to that. I thought, geez, you know, if these people could keep coming back to me, you know, sometimes still today, you know, Meredith talks about me, or, I have women in my life like Terri and Peggy, and I think, wow, what a mind blower. Because these girls, they know all about everything. Terry's a school teacher, Peggy knows how to dress, Meredith always looks great. Me, I'm trying to figure out how to just get out of bed and get my clothes on most of the time. I mean, really, I had one baby who always kept saying, the reason I love you, Terri, and wanted you to sponsor me is because you're not perfect. And I'm like, well, what does she mean by that? I'm trying. This is as good as it gets for me. So, the things that touch me the most in here, and I try to give to others is, just to reach out and touch someone, on the shoulder, or, look at someone in the eyes and say, I'm really glad you're here. Because you gave that to me and it saved my life. You made my little things seem really big. Every little victory. When I had to go on a job interview, I would get dressed and then I'd go to a noon meeting first. And then you guys would all go, Terri, you look good in that dress. Look at you in your outfit. So you'd get my little spirits up, and then they'd put me on the street, and then I'd, go do the interview. And, it's hard to do that when you're low bottom drunk. You don't know what people are doing out in the world. You don't know what people say in an interview. You don't know how to answer questions, about anything. I remember, this guy in a thrifty drugstore asking me really loudly if I didn't I know the Polaroid cameras were recalled? Well, how would I know that? I didn't come out in the daylight. How would I know that? So I was humiliated by the thrifty checkout guy when I was new. I found new sobriety to be humiliating and demoralizing, way more than the drinking and drugging that I did, because that was a life I knew. But I'll tell you something, it takes a lot of courage to start doing things that you're not good at. And that's what we do when we come here. I started spinning, trying to get in this spin class. I don't spin, you could tell, but I'm just saying. I go to this spin class, and in the spin class, they have this big mirror. For some reason, my sobriety is always in these kind of metaphors, so it's a metaphor. So I'm in the spin class. I am the fattest girl in the spin class. And I'm just pedaling away. My face is red. Everybody else looks gorgeous. They look like they're ready to break out on a movie set. They got, the boobs and the whole thing. My hair's up. I got no makeup. I mean, I'm dying, right? And I'm smiling at myself from ear to ear going, well, girl, at least you out here trying, It's a lot harder for me because I don't look good, don't feel good, don't want to be there, but there I am, just trying to do it. And, that's where the self-esteem comes from. Low self-esteem doesn't come from what people told us a long time ago. Low self-esteem comes from not doing what you're afraid of, from balking at trying to do something for yourself. We've paid all the dues we need to, really. And staying sober every day, it's a tough hustle. And if I don't give myself the good stuff, then how am I ever going to make it through the bad stuff? And I want to thank you guys as a group. I know I'm to the end of my time, but you guys have walked through almost everything in my life with me. When I got ready to get married, I was here speaking. When we got divorced, I was here speaking. My daughter, I brought my daughter to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was so scared you'd hurt her or reject us, and, you were there for us, and eventually she got sober in here for 3.5 years, and, later on, when she killed someone out on a slip, I came here to speak, to tell you, this is the first place I came from the jail, from Santa Monica jail. I came here, I found Leticia, I pulled her outside, and I told her the whole thing, nothing in my life has been too small or too big to bring to the rooms and to the members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you have never, ever hurt me on purpose. And I so appreciate it. Somehow or another, the magic has been here. And, and I've learned to be a giver here. I've learned to show up for my daughter here. I've learned to make amends here. Somebody asked me the other day, how come you go and see your daughter all the time? How come you are fighting for her so hard? How come after all these years you're still hanging in there? And I said, because I love her and I owe her. I got sober for her. She didn't stay sober, but I did. And we pay back here. That's what we do. And we just had a hearing 2 days ago. We got granted this evidentiary hearing. I'm just bringing you up to speed. And because she's doing life. She went out on a slip after 3.5 years, and she killed someone, and they gave her life. And when it came her time for her attorney to say anything, he just rested. So they gave her life at 22. And I stayed sober. I'm just telling you. So it's doable. And the way I stayed sober is I remembered 2 other women in the program who had found their children dead or their children had killed themselves and they had managed to stay sober. So there's always a story worse than yours that you can look and see that it's doable. Because that's all we need. I've never been a person you've had to carry. If you just show me the doorway, if you just show me where to go, I'll go there. You know, and that's what we offer each of you, you know, is we'll show you. We'll even walk there with you. And anyway, so out of 101 odds, my daughter actually got this evidentiary hearing 2 days ago where if the judge says yes, then she gets a new trial. And it was amazing. It was amazing to get to that point, and it was amazing to be in the game. You know, that's what it is. We can't tell the outcome and we can't change what happens to us, but we have a lot to say about who we are. Being the heroes in our own story is a big deal. And just not drinking a day at a time is a heroic action for an alcoholic. You know, it's the kindest thing that we could do for ourselves. Is just don't drink and don't hurt ourselves and, you know, like that. So I'm going to close with this one little thing about the drunk in the hole, okay? So, because this is epitome of AA to me. Got it on an email. I find messages like on the Cosby Show, so look for the word God's talking to you all the time. Anyway, there's this drunk in the hole, right? So the drunk's in the hole. How many of you heard this? Okay, good. It's 2. Oh, good. So there's a drunk. So don't say it if I say it wrong. I'm going to do it really fast because we got close. So there's a drunk down the hole, and he's calling out for help, right? You know, no one's coming around, and then, you know, suddenly a priest shows up and he says, okay, well, I'll pray for you, you know, and the drunk's like, you know, how's that going to help me get out? And he says, well, just let's pray. So they both pray, and then the priest says, God bless you, and he leaves, and the drunk's still in the hole. And so then the drunk's calling for help, and then a psychiatrist comes along, and he says, so, you know, I'll help you get out of the hole. How'd you get in the hole? Do you like it in the hole? You know, is there something invested? You know, has your family always been in the hole? Is this something you volunteered for? Or is this, you know, did you dig this hole or did you just fall in it? You know, like, is this a self-inflicted hole? You know, like this, right? But then after an hour, he's like, time's up, and he leaves, and the drunk's still in the hole. So, you know, pretty soon, a sober alcoholic comes walking by, hears the guy yelling out, and he jumps down in the hole. And the drunk, you know, being judgmental like we are, says, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Now we're both stuck in the hole. And the sober alcoholic said, that's okay. I've been here, and I know the way out. So anyway, thank you so much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app, to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.